Right now, somewhere out there, a stranger's opinion of you is sitting in your chest like it belongs there, taking up space it was never invited into. A comment you didn't ask for, a look someone gave you, a decision someone else made that had nothing to do with you but somehow ruined your entire afternoon anyway, hours after the moment itself has already passed. You have been renting out your peace to people who never even asked to borrow it, and most of them don't know they have the keys, wouldn't even recognize the door if you pointed straight at it. We are not talking about ignoring the world today. We are talking about withdrawing the lease entirely, permanently, starting with the terms you never actually agreed to in the first place. Machiavelli never wrote a single word about being liked, and he considered the desire to be universally liked one of the more dangerous weaknesses a ruler could carry into any decision. He wrote about being untouchable instead, and there is a version of that same untouchability available to you the moment you stop treating your internal state as public property anyone can walk into uninvited. Rearrange the furniture and leave without consequence. So ask yourself the uncomfortable question most people spend their whole life avoiding, because answering it honestly requires admitting something most people would rather not look at directly, something that sits closer to the surface than they'd like to acknowledge on an ordinary day. How much of your peace right now, in this exact moment, is actually being controlled by someone who isn't even in the room with you, who may not even be thinking about you at all, who has moved on entirely while you're still carrying what they left behind? If the answer is more than you'd like to admit, you already understand exactly why this video exists. In the next few minutes, we are going to build the fortress Machiavelli understood better than almost anyone in history, the one that keeps your internal state entirely yours, regardless of what the world outside it decides to do next. Lesson 1. The least peace. Most people are walking around with a peace of mind they do not actually own outright. It was financed by circumstances staying favorable, by people behaving the way they were expected to, by the world cooperating just enough, moment to moment, to keep the illusion of calm intact without anyone examining the foundation too closely. The moment any of those conditions shift, even slightly, the peace collapses instantly, because it was never really theirs in the first place. It was borrowed against good behavior from everyone and everything around them, a loan nobody remembered taking out until the payment came due. Machiavelli watched princes make this exact mistake constantly, building their entire sense of security on alliances, on public approval, on the temporary goodwill of people who owed them nothing permanent and would abandon the arrangement the moment it stopped serving their own interests. He understood that anything built on conditions outside your control will eventually be taken from you, not because the world is cruel in some deliberate sense, but because the world was never obligated to keep cooperating in the first place, and never promised to, regardless of how long the arrangement happened to hold. This is the first uncomfortable truth worth sitting with for longer than a few seconds. If your calm depends on everyone around you behaving correctly, you do not have peace. You have a temporary loan with an interest rate you haven't calculated yet, and it comes due more often than most people are willing to admit. Ask yourself honestly how much of today's mood was decided by you, and how much was decided by a message you received, a tone someone used, a small inconvenience that had nothing to do with your actual life and everything to do with someone else's timing. Someone else's bad day passed along to you like a debt you never agreed to inherit and never had any say in accepting. Most people cannot separate the two anymore. Their internal weather has been fully outsourced, and they call the resulting instability just being human, when it is actually just being unguarded, an entirely different thing wearing a more forgivable name. A single unanswered text can derail an entire evening for someone operating this way, not because the silence itself carries any real weight, but because the peace being disrupted was never actually theirs to begin with, only borrowed against the other person's continued cooperation. which was never guaranteed in the first place. Lesson 2. Indifference as a strategic asset. This is the part that gets misunderstood constantly, so let me be direct about it before moving any further. Strategic indifference is not coldness, and it is not pretending you don't care about anything at all, which is a shallow imitation of the real thing that collapses the first time it's actually tested. It is refusing to let your emotional state be dictated by people who have not earned the right to move it in the first place. Machiavelli's princes cultivated a specific kind of detachment from public opinion, not because they were incapable of feeling anything, but because a ruler who reacts visibly to every insult, every rumor, every shift in popular sentiment becomes predictable, and predictable rulers become easy to destabilize by anyone willing to study the pattern. The same mechanism operates at a personal scale, in far smaller rooms with far lower stakes but the identical underlying logic. Every time you visibly react to something someone said about you, you confirm that this particular lever works, and you can expect it to be pulled again, harder, the next time someone wants a reaction out of you for their own reasons. Indifference, applied strategically rather than as a blanket refusal to feel anything at all, removes that lever entirely from their hands. This does not mean numbing yourself to everything that happens around you, becoming detached from the people and moments that genuinely deserve your presence. It means becoming deliberate about which opinions are actually allowed inside the walls, and which ones get acknowledged, evaluated briefly for usefulness, and then released without taking up permanent residence in your chest for the rest of the week. Most people let every opinion in automatically, the way an open door lets in whoever happens to be walking past at any given hour, regardless of their intentions. Machiavelli's approach was to decide who gets a key before they ever reach the door at all, long before the knocking even starts. A stranger's passing insult means nothing structural about your life, yet it can occupy hours of mental space in someone who never learned to ask whether that particular opinion actually held a key in the first place, or was simply assumed to have one by default. Lesson 3. The fortress mind. A fortress is not built to keep everything out at all costs. A fortress that lets nothing through eventually becomes a prison instead of a stronghold, cutting off supply lines, allies, information it actually needs to function and survive over the long term. The fortress Machiavelli describes is selective by design, built with gates that open for the right people and stay firmly shut for everyone else, regardless of how loudly they knock or how entitled they feel to entry simply because they demanded it. Building this internally starts with a simple, uncomfortable inventory, the kind most people avoid taking because the results are rarely flattering. Who currently has unrestricted access to your emotional state? And did they earn that access through years of demonstrated care, or did you simply never install a gate to begin with, leaving the entrance wide open by default? For most people, the honest answer is the second one. Strangers, acquaintances, people who will forget the interaction entirely by tomorrow morning, all walking straight through an emotional structure with no walls at all, leaving whatever mess they want behind them on their way back out without a second thought. The fortress mind means building actual, deliberate criteria for access, instead of leaving the gate open out of habit. Does this person's opinion come from someone who knows you, who has demonstrated genuine care for your well-being over time, who has something real at stake in your outcome beyond a passing comment? If not, their opinion gets evaluated briefly at the gate and, more often than not, declined entry entirely, regardless of how forcefully or confidently it was delivered. This is not arrogance dressed up as philosophy. It is architecture. And architecture requires walls before it can require anything else, including the gates that eventually let the right people through. Someone who has known you for a decade and shown up during actual hardship has earned a different kind of access than a coworker's offhand comment made in passing on a Tuesday, and treating both with equal weight, is precisely how the fortress ends up with no functioning walls at all. Lesson 4. Selective engagement. Once the fortress exists, and the gates have been installed with real criteria behind them, the next skill is deciding what actually deserves a response from inside it, rather than answering every knock automatically out of habit. Machiavelli understood that not every provocation requires an answer, and that responding to everything is itself a form of weakness, disguised as diligence, mistaken for thoroughness, when it is really just a lack of discernment. A prince who addresses every rumor, every slight, every minor challenge to his authority spends his entire reign reacting instead of building anything of lasting value, exhausted by battles that were never worth fighting in the first place. Selective engagement means asking a simple question before responding to anything that threatens your calm, a question most people skip entirely in the heat of the moment. Does this actually require my energy, or is it simply demanding it loudly enough that it feels like it does? Those are not the same thing, even though they often masquerade as each other convincingly. A genuine problem requiring your attention deserves engagement, full and considered. A provocation designed purely to extract a reaction deserves nothing at all, because engaging with it confirms the provocation worked exactly as intended, teaching the provocateur that the tactic pays off. This is uncomfortable to practice, because silence in the face of provocation often feels, in the moment, like losing ground you should be defending, like conceding something you never actually agreed to concede. It is not losing, it is refusing to spend a finite resource, your attention and your peace, on something that was never going to produce anything worth the cost of engaging with it. The people who understand this distinction spend a fraction of the energy everyone else spends, simply managing their own emotional reactions to things that never actually needed a reaction in the first place. Energy that could have gone somewhere that actually mattered. A comment left under a post, designed purely to get a rise out of whoever reads it, only succeeds if someone decides it deserves a reply. Left alone, it simply sits there, unanswered, and loses whatever power it briefly appeared to have. Lesson 5. Reclaiming sovereign territory. Everything covered so far builds toward a single practical outcome. Treating your internal state as sovereign territory rather than public land, anyone can walk across whenever they please, at any hour, without so much as announcing themselves first. Machiavelli's princes did not achieve stability by controlling everything happening outside their borders, an impossible task no ruler has ever actually accomplished for long. They achieved it by controlling, with total precision, what was allowed to happen within them, which was always the only territory genuinely available to control in the first place. This distinction matters enormously, because you cannot control what people say about you, what circumstances arise, what the world decides to throw at you on any given day without warning. You can control what you allow those things to do once they cross into your actual internal territory, which is a very different kind of power than trying to manage the entire outside world into behaving. This is not a single decision made once and then forgotten about for good. It is a daily practice of checking the gates, evaluating who currently has access, and revoking that access the moment it becomes clear someone has been using it carelessly or in bad faith. The peace this builds is not the fragile, borrowed kind discussed at the beginning of this video, the kind that evaporates the instant conditions shift without warning. It does not depend on the world cooperating, on people behaving well, on circumstances staying favorable through no effort of your own. It depends entirely on the walls you have built and the gates you have learned to guard, which means it belongs to you completely, regardless of what happens outside them tomorrow or any day after that. Two people can face the exact same setback on the exact same morning, and one loses the whole day to it, while the other continues on largely unaffected, not because the second person cares less, but because the fortress they built simply never let the setback all the way inside. Lesson 6. Maintaining the walls under pressure. This is the part most people skip once the fortress starts feeling stable, mistaking the initial calm for a finished project rather than an ongoing one. Walls do not maintain themselves simply because they were built correctly the first time. Machiavelli understood that any fortress, no matter how well designed, requires constant inspection, because pressure finds weaknesses over time that were invisible on the day construction finished. The specific danger here is complacency, the quiet assumption that because the gates held last week, they will simply continue holding without further attention from you. This is precisely when old patterns tend to slip back in unnoticed, one small, unguarded exception at a time, until the fortress that once felt solid has quietly become porous again, in ways you don't fully register until the damage is already done. The discipline required here is small but constant, a regular check on who has been given access recently, and whether that access was actually earned or simply granted out of fatigue, convenience, or the desire to avoid an uncomfortable confrontation in the moment. A gate reopened out of exhaustion is still a gate reopened, regardless of the reason behind it, and the walls only hold as well as the last time they were actually inspected, rather than simply assumed to be intact. A single tired week, where every opinion gets waved through without evaluation, can quietly undo months of careful gatekeeping, which is exactly why the inspection has to be a habit, rather than a one-time decision made back when the fortress first went up. Everything in this video comes down to a single principle Machiavelli returned to constantly across his writing, a principle he applied ruthlessly to the practical business of holding power in an unstable world. Power that depends on the goodwill of others is not power at all. It is a loan that can be called in at any moment, by anyone, for reasons that have nothing to do with fairness. The same is true of peace. Peace that depends on the world behaving correctly was never actually yours to begin with, no matter how solid it felt, while conditions happened to be cooperating. Real peace is sovereign territory, guarded deliberately and consistently, with gates that open for the people who have earned entry over time and stay closed for everyone, simply demanding it because they feel entitled to walk in unannounced. You started this video with your peace scattered across 100 small transactions with people who never even knew they were withdrawing from it, taking a little here and a little there without a second thought, day after day. If you followed this honestly, you already understand that the withdrawal only continues with your ongoing permission, granted daily, mostly without your awareness, until you start paying attention to exactly where it's leaking out and who has been standing at the gate collecting it. This channel exists to keep giving you the real architecture behind lasting internal stability, past the shallow advice that tells you to simply not care without ever explaining how that actually works in any usable, repeatable way you can apply the next time it actually matters. On an ordinary day, when nobody is watching. If today's video gave you something worth using, do 3 things right now before you move on with your day, none of which take more than a moment, but all of which quietly matter. Like this video, so more people currently leasing out their peace to strangers who don't even know they hold the keys have a real chance to find it. Share it with someone you know who reacts to everything and is quietly exhausted because of it, spending energy on battles that were never worth fighting in the first place and rarely remember why they started. Subscribe to this channel right now, because the next video goes even deeper into exactly how the most composed minds in history built walls that actually held under real pressure, not just in theory, not just when things were already going well. Drop this in the comments before you go so it stays with you. I guard my own territory. My peace is no longer for rent. This was never meant to be entertainment you watch once and forget on your way to something else. It was meant to change which gate you check first the next time the world tries to walk in uninvited, assuming it still has the same access it always had. The access you never actually meant to give away. I will see you in the next one.